Technology sure has changed the way we interact with our world. There was a time not that long ago where I might come to an event like this and actually just sit there and enjoy myself, right? But now we've got these devices that help us keep a memory of every little thing that happens, even very insignificant things. But, you know, I can take a selfie. Let's do that. Let's take a selfie. Everybody smile. I guess I got most of you in there. Hey, there we go. Oh, what a good-looking bunch. And next week or tomorrow, I can look at this picture and it'll remind me of what it was like, how cool it was to be here with you. And I can post it to my social media to remind everybody else how cool I am, which is frankly why we really do that, right? Technology also gives me amazing access to other people's ideas. So as long as my data plan is paid up and I'm within range, I can connect to the internet. And I can look at a picture of a famous painting or a building or a sculpture. I can read a poem or a play or a novel if my eyesight's good enough. And I can listen to a recording of just about any important piece of classical music written over the last several centuries. All the treasures of human culture right at my fingertips. It's amazing. But I think sometimes we mistake access for engagement. Just because I have access to something doesn't mean that I'm really engaging with it. And more importantly, classical music was never meant to be heard in this way alone. So today, one thing I would like to talk to you about is I want to re-enchant the composer's task. I want you to be excited about what composers do, because composers are awe-inspiring. First and foremost, a composer is a wizard at imagining sounds. That's what a composer is doing. They're organizing sounds in time, and that process begins with a vivid imagination. But then a composer has to undergo really quite rigorous and difficult training to learn how to translate those symbols from the imagination into, as I say, a set of symbols that a performer can execute. And when a performer executes these symbols, we are suddenly able to hear into the mind of a great thinker. Do you know it took human beings centuries to develop and perfect this technology that lets us hear this thing? It's really amazing. Composers are solitary people. We like to work by ourselves. In fact, that's one thing that drew me to composing. I'm really an introvert, and composing is something like doing a Sudoku or a crossword puzzle or a game of solitaire. You're organizing a bunch of dots on a graph in a room all by yourself. It's an introvert's dream. You'd love it. But we can't do it all by ourselves. We require the help of somebody else. We require a performer, who is another extraordinary person. Performers spend decades of their life learning how to decipher the symbols that composers left behind so that they can open these windows into these minds of these great composers. It's really extraordinary. So I'll give you an example. This is a piece of music, or rather, this is not yet music. Right? It's a set of instructions. And these instructions are by one of the greatest minds who ever lived, Johann Sebastian Bach. Bach was born in Eisenach, Germany in 1685, and he died in Leipzig in 1750. That's very far away and a very long time ago. But that doesn't stop us from hearing Bach's great thoughts as long as we have a performer. So for as long as Nick was playing that piece, we were able to see with great clarity and detail into Bach's thoughts. And then as soon as he stopped, which was not the end of the piece, by the way, it went back to being just a really cool set of instructions. And that's something like magic, right? So what was Bach trying to say? What was he driving at? You know, people have written hundreds of books on that topic. I think I have dozens of them in my office. My wife, Allison, will tell you that. So we're not going to be able to really unpack that here today. That's just too much information. But I think part of the answer lies in something that Bach knew. Not something he knew as a fact you could look up on your phone, but something he knew as a way of doing. Let me tell you what I mean. Music has a melodic element. That's how the notes interact when you play them one after another. And it also has a harmonic element. That's what the notes do, how they interact with each other when you play them simultaneously. Bach understood better, perhaps, than anyone before or since, that every good melody implies a compelling harmony. And every good harmony is, in a sense, a frozen moment of interaction between multiple simultaneous melodies. Bach had unlocked somehow the secret to writing every melody to be full of wonderful harmonic implications, and of writing every harmony to be full of incredible melodic possibilities. And using this one instrument, which is capable of playing at most 2 notes at a time, Bach managed to say something about sound and musical grammar that we find really compelling even hundreds of years after his death. Somehow this music reminds us that simple things are often profound, and profound things are often simple. As I listen to this music, it seems to be about the interaction between the one and the many, which is something that has fascinated philosophers since the dawn of human consciousness. It's also an exquisite reminder of the power of expression one person is capable of making when they say exactly the right thing. These truths that Bach was speaking about or writing about are somehow very important to our understanding of what it means to be a human being. And this technology of classical music is one of the ways that we human beings invented to pass this wisdom on to our children and our grandchildren and our grandchildren's grandchildren. It's amazing. So we've talked about the composer and we've talked about the performer, and that only leaves one person to complete the circle, and that's the audience. That's you. You're required to make the circle complete and to have the technology of classical music working the way it's supposed to. And I'll tell you, when that technology is working properly, it's intimate, it's immediate, it's personal. It's something you're going to want to experience live. We have this technology of recording, which has done something really extraordinary. It opens the window into the composer's mind, and then it forces it open so that it can never be closed again. And that's wonderful. It's given us, I don't want to take too much away from it, it's given us access to things that in prior times we would have had to have been very wealthy or well-connected to hear. Now we can all hear it, right? But that access has come at a cost because it changes the way we think about music. And I'll give you 4 of the many ways that recording technology has changed our thoughts about music. Firstly, it changes our conception of music in time. If I like something I'm listening to quite a bit, I can go back and listen to it again. And if I hate it, I can fast forward past it and skip entirely. And that changes the composer's control over the sounds in time, which, as I've said, is one of the things composers are supposed to be in charge of. Secondly, when I'm not in the room with the person who's playing, this music loses some of the immediacy, the intimacy, the personal aspect. I begin to take it for granted. Thirdly, I start to think of the music as a thing instead of an experience. So I have an iPod here, and it's the biggest one I could find. I wanted to put a lot of music on it, so it's huge. And I got to be honest with you, even as I'm giving you this talk, I think about the files in here as a thing. Don't you? But music is not supposed to be a thing. It's supposed to be an experience meant to be shared, which brings me to my 4th point. Most of us experience music in some way like this. We have a set of earbuds in, or maybe we're in the car by ourselves, and this is lovely, but I'm experiencing this in isolation. Nobody else is experiencing it with me. That's not how music is supposed to work. We're supposed to experience it in community. So I want to encourage you, make live music a part of your life. This technology that I'm speaking about, I really want to impress upon you, this is all about love. When a composer dedicates years and years of her life to learning how to leave behind a set of symbols so detailed that even years and years, centuries after she's died, we can still hear her very best thoughts, that is a courageous act of love. When a performer dedicates impossible, and Nick will tell you, impossible hours of practicing to learn how to open windows into this composer's mind and that composer's mind and that composer's mind so that you can hear this gift, that's a courageous act of love. And hear me out, when you as an audience member sit in your seat and you leave behind your distractions and give your full attention to this music that's coming at you, that's a courageous act of love. All three parts are necessary. As I say, I want you to make this live music a part of your life. I want you to find a living, breathing human being with blood flowing through her veins and sit in front of her as she activates the molecules of air around you in waves to give you the greatest thoughts of a dead person's music. How incredible is that? Don't you want to be a part of that? It's amazing. It's amazing. So just to sort of demonstrate some of that, I've written a piece of music for today for my son, Nicholas. This is my son. I didn't introduce him earlier. Yeah, let's give him a hand. I have 4 kids. They all play music. My wife and my 4 kids play music together. It's awesome. I highly recommend it. I guess the 4 kids part is not for everybody, but I certainly enjoy it. It's amazing. So I've played with Nick many times. I know what Nick is good at. I know what he likes to do. I know what he doesn't like to do. And so I've written a piece of music that uses his best qualities. My music refers to the past. So you may hear ideas that you recognize. You may hear a little snippet of something from the Bach that we heard earlier. I like my music to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And even though this piece is quite short, I think I've worked to do that. And I've also repeated ideas and developed them because that's one of a composer's tools, so that the piece starts to tell a story. What did I mean by the music you're about to hear? Well, that's an interesting question. A lot of people ask that. One of the beautiful things about music in general, but particularly classical music, it's going to mean something different to every person in this room. You are required for the piece to get a meaning. You're the last stop on its train to meaning, right? And after all, if I could tell you what I meant, I wouldn't have needed to write a piece of music about it. Now, it so happens that late last night, in all the craziness, Nick and I recorded this. And we did it a few times to make sure that Nick was sounding his best. So I've got it here on my iPod. And boy, Nick, you sound fabulous. It's really good. It reminds me of our time together as we were working on this piece. It reminds me of the time that we spent together, all those times playing that music, and that's a beautiful thing for a father and son. But I got to tell you, it's not the same thing as being here in the room with him. It's a little bit like the selfie I took at the beginning of our talk. It'll remind me of what this was like, but it will not be the same as being here in this room with you. A picture of a hug is not the same thing as getting an embrace from a friend. You wouldn't want to live your life, maybe some of you do, unfortunately, but you wouldn't want to live your life just looking at pictures of yourself doing things, would you? You'd want to actually be there. Don't settle for a picture. Don't settle for a snapshot or a recording. Don't even settle for this video you are currently watching. Go out and find somebody to play live music for you. And now let's hear as Nick opens a window into my mind. Thank you.